This is Road Noise, episode number 60, Political Aftermath, How to Move Forward as Americans After the Election. Hello and welcome again to another episode of Road Noise Life 1 Mile at a Time. I'm your host, Michael Blackston, and you're sitting beside me in the passenger seat as I commute all over the Southeast for my work. If you hear the sound of a rumble or something under my voice, that's just the noise of the road, hence the reason I call it road noise. You already know that if you're not a first-time listener, but I welcome you in if you are a first-time listener, and I hope you'll enjoy this episode. We're going to talk about politics today, and it's not something that is easy for me to talk about because I absolutely abhor politics. I hate politics, but there comes a time in almost everybody's life that politics is kind of at the forefront, and it has been as Americans have elected President-elect Donald Trump as our next president. There's been a lot going on since that election process happened. Over the past year, it's just been mayhem on social media and the regular media and in our lives and our friendships and family lives. Politics has taken a spot in the front seat, and it's something that I think needs to be addressed, and here's why. After the elections, as I'm sure you know, many people took to the streets and began to protest. There was the day after, supporters of Hillary Clinton were, I don't know really how to put it in words, because what I'm not going to do in this episode is I'm not going to tell you who I voted for. I'm not going to tell you where my political associations lie, but because I don't think that's important now, because Donald Trump is going to be our president for the next 4 years. So I think we move forward, and that's what this is going to be about. But a lot of the Hillary supporters, to me, went a little too far on social media and just everywhere, including the protests that are going on as this is being recorded right now, people protesting the elections. And I do have something to say about that. I'll get to that later on in the episode. And it just kind of prompted me as I listened to this, and believe me, I know if you're listening to this and you were a supporter of Hillary and you have had something to say. I'm not saying you shouldn't have something to say. So listen to the entire episode so you'll understand where I'm coming from with my heart. I'm not saying you shouldn't have had something to say, because I do believe as Americans that's one of our greatest freedoms, is the ability and the freedom to say what's on our minds, to have our voices heard. But I also know that had it gone the other way, had Republicans not gotten their candidate elected, had Hillary Clinton won the presidency, it would have been the same thing. I don't believe the protests would have happened, but then again, I can't say that for sure because I don't know that for sure. All I know is that both sides of the issue have been extremely vocal. A lot of anger, a lot of hate, a lot of fire from both sides that is unnecessary, that has divided this country, and I think fueled by a certain aspect of our everyday lives. I think that would have happened on either side. I just think that it's been awful, and I think that we as a country need to come together. So it prompted me to do this episode called Political Aftermath, How to Move Forward as Americans. Like I said before, I hate politics. If anybody's talking about politics in my general direction, in my earshot, I will do everything I can to get out of the conversation, get out of the room. I hate them. But we've gotten to a point in our country where it's hard to trust anybody, especially a politician. I don't know who's trusted least, politicians or lawyers. You hear the old jokes about lawyers, but it's, to me, politicians, I have a harder time trusting them than anybody. And so I decided to think on this and say, what do we need to do as Americans? What is our duty and obligation moving forward as American citizens? How can we let our voices be heard in the right way? How can we let our opinions and our thoughts be known? And what do we need to do beyond just talking about it? Because I think as Americans, we don't have just a duty to spout out a bunch of nonsense or even spout out what we know. We have the duty to act. And so I want to talk about what I believe that looks like. And that's what I'm going to do right now. We've come up with 7 points for you to consider. So starting with number 1, and this may be a fairly long episode because I'm going to kind of pontificate. I just listed out the bullet points and said I'm going to roll with it as I go with each bullet point. I'm not going to script anything out. I'm not going to write any keynote things under each bullet point. I'm going to mention that bullet point and then I'm going to go with it. So this could be a longer episode. We'll just have to see. So here's number 1 of 7. I think we need to get informed before we spout off. One of the biggest problems that I have seen, and I keep mentioning social media in this podcast, and a lot of the episodes I talk about social media because it's an important part of my life, not only because I use it like everybody else does on Facebook and Twitter and stuff like that in my personal life, but I also trying to promote this podcast and doing market research for business opportunities that I have in mind. Social media has ingrained itself in all of those aspects, and so I am constantly there, and I'm constantly seeing people spouting off about politics. And one of the biggest things that drives me nuts when people spout off about politics is people just repeating things they've heard without looking into it themselves. They listen to other people, and instead of saying, well, here's what they claim, let me find out if I believe this based on fact, or if I'm just going to believe this based on I don't want to deal with it and I like this person, so I'm going to believe what they say. And that's on either side of the coin. Again, everything that I'm going to talk about in this episode, I'm talking about this in equal part. Republican, Democrat, Libertarian, Tea Party, anything like that, any of those areas of politics, all of them are guilty of these things. All of the people who call themselves members of those parties, whatever, are all guilty of this. Not everybody, but there are members of those parties. All of them. Everything, and politically, this is a level across the board. There's no one area of politics where everybody's right and then everybody else is wrong. The point I'm making in this is that no matter where you stand politically, you have not only the right to talk about it, but you do have an obligation that when you do speak, that your speech is accurate. When it comes to opinion, your opinion is your opinion. But when you're stating fact, we need, and I'm guilty of this as well, we need to do our research before we start spouting off about how things are. There are things from the Republican Party that I saw about Hillary Clinton that I'm sure were inaccurate, because somebody else said it and somebody else shared this and it got a viral post or something else, and somebody thought, well, I don't like her, I'm going to go ahead and share this because it's got to be true because she's a bad person. Same thing with Donald Trump. Somebody said this about him, so I'm going to just go ahead because I don't like him in the first place and this supports my hatred toward Donald Trump, so I'm just going to post it. That's nonsense, it's not helpful, and it's divisive. And it's not fair to anybody, including yourself, because if it's shown that that stuff is false, then it makes you look like an idiot. Don't do it. Find the facts when you're going to talk politically or anything else when you're going to state something as fact. Make sure you know it is fact. If you are too lazy to look it up, don't feel like it, then don't say it. Number 2. Ignore the media. The media is corrupt. I can tell you this because I used to be a member of the media. I was a member of the media back when it wasn't as bad as it is now, and I knew it was corrupt, and things have gotten worse and worse. The media is all about dollars and cents. The media is about sensationalizing everything. The media is very left heavy. In some cases, you got people like CNN and MSNBC that are very left, liberal heavy, and then you've got very conservative heavy areas of the media like Fox News and Sean Hannity and some of these people that are the famous talk show host Rush Limbaugh and stuff like that are heavily canted to the right. So you've got people on the right and the left. And it doesn't matter. Everybody has an agenda. Now, while these people can tell you what's going on, it is up to you to find out the truth of the matter, because journalists are not going to do that for you. So when you hear the media say something as a fact, unless it is something like a fact that is indisputable, that is, right out there and it can be nothing other than fact, other than that, you need to look into it yourself if you're going to believe it. And this is unfortunate for me because I hate politics so much. So if I'm going to want to learn about the new candidates, and you're going to start hearing about them probably very soon, I would think that because there's so much hatred for President-elect Donald Trump, you're probably going to go ahead and start seeing these political candidates that are going to run against him in 4 years. And I want to find out what they're going to be doing, not based on, and what they believe, not based on what the media tells me they believe and have done, but what I can find out in truth. And I know you may think, well, all I have to rely on is what the media tells me. That's not true. We are in the age of information. We have all kinds of information at our fingertips. You can look at a candidate, and if a media outlet tells you one thing about their stance, what they've done in history, you can go back and check those facts. You can look into it and say, okay, they really didn't do this. They really didn't say this. There's a lot of rhetoric going on right now about President-elect Donald Trump that is absolutely false. All of these fearmongers who are just feeding their hatred of him through the protesters and telling people, you should be afraid now, our country is going down the drain now because we elected him. Well, one thing people need to understand is we as a country elected him. He won the election, which means the majority of the country is on his side as far as when it came down to those two candidates. Now, I'm not going to tell you who I voted for. I'm not going to tell you whose stance I am on. You can probably figure that out for yourself based on the fact that I'm a very, very devout and conservative Christian. Very conservative on all of the issues. I'm very conservative. So, make what you want of that. I'm trying to be fair here, though, because we only had two candidates, and I want you to understand I was not happy overall with either candidate. I don't think either candidate was very presidential. I just ended up having to vote for the one that I thought fit my Christian morals more than the other did. And not based on distant history either. Based on what they're saying right now, coming out of the mouths of those people in the debates and in their situations where they were interviewed, and in their talking points, their campaign tours and all of that stuff. I used that information coming out of the mouths of the people, whether they're lying, whether they're not. I have to trust what's coming out of the mouth of them. Right now, I'm not going to trust the media. So that's number 2. Ignore the media, because the media is corrupt. It has its own agenda. Number 3, discuss. Don't argue. This is something I've noticed from all of my friends and family and acquaintances there on Facebook. Nobody seems to be able to have a decent adult discussion about this when it's two people on opposite sides of the issues. It turns into, it'll start as a debate, then it'll turn into an argument and mean, angry words. And that's helping nobody. Nobody. It's not helping either side, because you just look angry and uncontrolled. I rarely see, and this isn't all of the time, but on most occasions, I rarely see actual facts being put out. I see people spouting stuff other people have said, because I've seen people spouting stuff that I know to be false, but they think it's right because they heard somebody say it. Again, on both sides of the issue, Republican, Democrat. All I'm saying is, if you're going to get into a discussion, if you are on opposing sides of this issue, I beg you to please do it with decency. Do it as adult-friendly discussions. Go into it saying, hey, we don't agree. We're probably not going to come out of this in agreement, but if we're going to talk about it, we're going to do it as friends. We're going to do it as a unified country, talking about issues that may divide us, and even though they divide us on those issues, as Americans, we come together unified. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit more in depth in just a little bit. It's my final point. No, it's not. It's point number 5. But anyway, number 3, discuss. Don't argue. Number 4, be kind to each other and be peaceful. This is kind of piggybacking on number 3. But I'm going to camp out here for a minute, because again, I am somebody who has a hair trigger temper, and if you listen to the last episode, I talked about some issues I had on Facebook where I actually said some things I didn't mean because they were knee-jerk reactions. They came out. I can't say they came out before I could stop them, because I actually made a point to write out the post and then post it. It was intended at the time, but after I had time to look back on it, I realized it was not the best part of me, not the way I needed to be. And so I am preaching to the choir here when I talk about be kind to each other and to be peaceful. I'm also going to camp out here and talk a little bit about the protests that are going on as this is recorded. Now, when this comes back, I want to say it'll probably be after Thanksgiving when it's released and you're listening to it. So the protests, if they're not over by then, they will be minimal compared to what's going on right now. As soon as Donald Trump was elected as the President of the United States, people took to the streets to protest. I'm going to talk more in depth on that. I'm kind of getting ahead of myself. Let's go back to social media. I promise I'm coming back to the protests. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, I guess. I'm not on Instagram a whole lot. I'm not on Twitter a really whole lot, simply because I'm not a big fan of Twitter, because I like words, I like explanation, I like to have plenty of opportunity to get the meaning across what I'm trying to say. I don't want to just have 140 something characters to be able to spout it, splurt it out, and then it's done. I don't feel like that's a good opportunity to get the full meaning across of what I have to say, unless I'm just saying something funny. And a lot of people use Twitter as a political podium, and I don't feel like the full brunt of what they're trying to get across is able to be put across, unless what I'm seeing is the full brunt. And if that's the case, a lot of times it's just mean, nasty, and I have no use for it. So the main social media area would be Facebook that I'm kind of seeing in the back of my mind as I talk about this. Family and friends. I say family, but I was looking at a political back and forth last night between one of the most godly women I know and one of the most ungodly people I've ever seen. I'm not a friend with this person. I don't even know them. But according to what I was seeing this man saying in his posts, he's not godly. And that's not an insult. It means he doesn't believe in God. He has no use for God. This woman at the same time is one of the most godly women I know. She's very vocal about it. They're cousins. They're family. And they got into an argument back and forth on Facebook, and I was able to read their back and forth in the comments, and it broke my heart because they're family. I actually had a little bit of a back and forth on that last thing in last episode that I told you I posted, that I recanted and I took it off and I made some apologies to some people. I didn't feel like I had to apologize to my aunt because we did have a decent, humane discussion with each other. But at the same time, it was going back and forth opposite of each other as family. And honestly, I think that if you looked at that one between me and my aunt, I don't know why I said aunt, I say aunt. Anyway, if you had an opportunity to look at that, you would see that it was very civil between the two of us. But it's not always been that way, and I've seen that family and friends, I've seen friendships break up, I've seen family relationships go distant based on this political atmosphere, especially here in this last election. People have let it get under their skin so much that they have a hard time understanding that these are just political views. And while they do have implications for our future as a country, we have the obligation to be unified and kind to each other as we discuss these things, because anything other than that is divisive. Anything other than that is just going to tear us apart, and the more we're torn apart as a country, the weaker we get. As you know, the more we're together, the stronger we are. Together, united, we stand. So when we're talking about this stuff and when you're discussing this stuff, we need to be kind. We got to be friendly with each other. We got to understand that we don't know each other's background fully. We don't know what's going on in their lives that cause them to believe one way or other on either side of the political spectrum. All we know is we differ from that person and we have our own points of view. But just because you have a different point of view does not mean that you have to be enemies. That's the wonderful thing about humanity. We have free will. We have the opportunity, and in this country, the freedom to think the way we want to think. Now, I believe that a person ought to think based on truth and based on morality and decency. That's my feeling on the matter. And a person ought to obey the laws of this country. Even if we don't like the laws, we respect and obey them as far as we can. And therefore, we need to be kind to each other. We need to be civil. We need to be respectful, and we need to be unified. So be kind to each other and peaceful. Now, I'm mentioning this peaceful, and I'm going to go into the riots, or not the riots, but the protests. But the reason I said the word riots is because some of these protests have turned into riots. They've gone too far. First of all, I'm appalled at this country. Now, I may lose listeners here. I hope I don't. But I'm going to say it anyway because I'm appalled at people in this country who would protest the election process that we have observed forever. We have the best election process in the world. It is fair. It is the people speaking. And just because you don't like what the majority said, you have the right to protest, but I'm just disappointed at people. Especially there are a bunch of college students who are protesting right now, and I think a lot of it has to do with wanting to be heard. They're at that age where they feel like nobody listens to them and it's an opportunity for their voice to be heard, and I think it's misguided. I have no problem with people having a problem with Donald Trump as president. That's your prerogative. I have no problem with peaceful protesting on issues where there needs to be protesting. But right now, people are protesting our election process. They're protesting the election of Donald Trump because they don't like it that he won. I'm here to tell you that's wrong. If you have a problem with fracking in the oil industry, I think that's what it's called, and you want to protest it, fine. If you want to protest this pipeline with the issues going on with the Native Americans and you want to join in that protest, fine. Keep it peaceful. Protest. I have no problem with that. It's one of the freedoms of this country that we should be able to enjoy. But when it comes down to things that are fair and just the American people speaking, the electorate process, which is best. The Electoral College is there to help us balance out I think that it's time for you to shut up and go back to class or go back to work. That may not be popular, but that's my thoughts. Now, I want to go a little further, though. One of the reasons it's got me so worked up, and one of the reasons that I have to be careful. I have to be careful. I say things like shut up, and I don't like to hear my children say that. I probably shouldn't say that myself. I get worked up. You can see it, and you can hear it in my voice. The protests that I'm talking about are not the ones where people are holding signs and chanting or shouting. They're the ones where I'm talking about people blocking the streets, and that's become a popular thing now, especially in Thugville, for people to jump out into the middle of the streets and block all lanes of traffic. That is not a peaceful protest. That is disruptive, it's corruptive, and I think you should be arrested for it. I would not be opposed to the fire department bringing out the trucks and turning on the hoses on those people. Here's why. Michael, that seems violent and extreme. No, it's not. First of all, the police are, in this country right now, very unable to do much. If the police came and took those people to the side and made them move to the side and did it by force and they fought back, everybody would be screaming police brutality. So there's really nothing the police can do about it right now, but you've got to move those people out of the streets. There are people with emergencies trying to get through, and they can't. There are doctors and nurses trying to get to work, and they can't because people are blocking the streets. Maybe people who are on the way to the hospital because they're pregnant. People are blocking the streets. They can't get where they need to go. You're putting people's lives behind your political in importance, behind your political stance. You're not caring, and you're putting people in danger. And that is where I draw the line. I have no problem with peaceful protests. Have all the peaceful protests you want, but get out of the way. Don't destroy anything. Don't lay a harmful hand on anyone, even if they're opposing your view. Be peaceful. Be loud if you want to. Gather in large groups. That's what a protest is about. But when you start being disruptive, violent, and destructive, you've crossed the line. That's not protesting, that's rioting, and that's not America. Number 5, Unify. You want to represent America? We need to stop dividing ourselves. We need to unify. No matter what we believe politically, we need to say, okay, I support Hillary and her stances, or I support Donald Trump and his stances. I supported Bernie, or I supported Rubio, any of the candidates. But it is what it is. And instead of fighting and arguing and dividing this country, which makes us weak, we need to unify. The fact is, Donald Trump has been elected as the President of the United States. We'll get to see in the next 4 years whether he is effective or ineffective as a president. Whether he does harm or good. It is not for you to say right now whether that will happen one way or the other. We can only wait and see. We can support the office of the president. You do not have to like Donald Trump. I am not an Obama fan at all. Didn't vote for him the first time, didn't vote for him the second time. Not an Obama fan at all. I hate most of the policies he's put in place. However, he is currently, until his 8 years are up and Trump is inaugurated in, he's our president. And I respect the office of the President of the United States. As Commander-in-Chief, as somebody who wants to unify this country, I respect the office of the Commander-in-Chief and the leader of our country, the President of the United States. I don't like him. I don't have to like him. I don't like his policies. I don't have to like his policies. But I respect the office, and that's what I'm asking anyone within earshot of me to do, because that's what unifies our country, or it's one of the things that will help to unify our country. The world watches as America is breaking down, disintegrating. And the problem is not the people we have in office. It's the people we have as citizenry. It's breaking down because we are too invested in our own selves instead of the greater good for this country. And we could care less about how the country looks as a whole as long as we get our say. And as long as we make sure that everybody knows how tough we are in standing by our policies, so we're just going to divide ourselves. That's tearing this country apart. We are not united. And because of that, we are weakened. We don't have to agree with each other, but when it comes down to brass tacks, we're Americans, and we need to be and act American. We need to show the rest of the world that we still are the greatest country in the world, the mightiest country in the world, and that whatever our differences inwardly, as a country, we are a united front. To me, that means standing and placing your hand over your heart, removing your hat in the presence of our flag. That means telling our servicemen and our veterans, thank you for your service to our country. That means respecting everything this country stands for, including every symbol of freedom that we have. It means to me belting out the national anthem when it's sung or played. Again, standing, not kneeling in the presence of the flag. It means saying the Pledge of Allegiance, not because we're into some cult or anything like that, and we're putting our allegiance in any sort of godly ideals onto that flag, but we're pledging our allegiance to a country because people have died, fought, made sacrifices for us under the banner of that flag, and we do that as a country united, because as you've heard, united we stand, divided we fall. Number 6, again, kind of leading on out of that, individually, I think we need to reestablish pride as Americans. Now, I'm not talking about unity, I'm talking about individually here. I think you need to be proud to be an American. I'll tell you what, this road, the noise under the road, this road is really rough. If the noise of the road has gotten unbearable, I apologize. I'll try to work with that as I do post-production, but I am on a section of road that is just really, I think they have ground it up, getting ready to pave it or something, and it is just making this awful whine. But I can't pause the recording because the laptop that I'm using, the battery is in a low state, and I can't afford to pause it and wait it out. So hopefully this will go away fairly soon as I finish this. But anyway, I saw on Facebook earlier this week something that really got up under my skin, and it was by a lady who is an acquaintance of mine who was debating with someone about Donald Trump. She wasn't a Trump supporter, or she isn't a Trump supporter, and not only that, she is very vocal, and she's done nothing but spout hate. Hate, constant. So it's almost all she's been consumed with is she's just ticked off that Clinton didn't win the presidency, and it's made her mad, and she just won't let it go. Her social media, she's decided she's going to have her political stance known in very childish ways on Facebook. And I'm sure that if you've been on Facebook recently, know people like that. A friend of ours who is a Trump supporter kind of called her out on it in a very peaceful, calming way, saying, look, I understand that you are unhappy with the election of Donald Trump as president. I understand that you're saying you're afraid and all of this stuff, and that you don't know what's going to happen with the country and all the things that go along with that. But what I think we need to remember is that no matter how we feel about the presidency, Donald Trump and Pence both need our prayers that they would lead this country in a good way forward into progress. And here's what she had to say. Bear in mind that this person calls herself a devout Christian. She exhorts on topics based on Christian principles all the time. And here were her words. I will not be praying for somebody like him. I can't make myself pray for him. If you've listened to my podcast episodes before, you know that I am a supporter of praying for your enemies. To me, that meant she was separating herself from America. Because if you're refusing to pray for the progress and well-being of our leaders, then that means you're against praying for the progress and betterment of our country. That really bothered me. So I'm hoping that she'll change her tune, and that was just spouting. People, be proud to be an American. And then last, number 7, be the change you want to see. Instead of standing up in a picket line with a sign held up, or getting on Facebook or Twitter and spouting a bunch of hate because you didn't get your way, or because I'm still seeing anti-Hillary people spouting hate toward Hillary as well. And I've said before in this episode, that's not benefiting anybody, and especially not benefiting the country. If you want to see change, if you're spouting this stuff because it's not the change you wanted to see, then instead of doing those things that aren't helping anybody, why don't you stop and say, how can I be positive change? How can I implement my own life, my own words, to see change made in a positive way that actually might be beneficial and actually might help the country move forward? Be the change you want to see instead of spouting off about it, being negative, being hateful and hurtful, because you're doing nobody any good. All of that is worthless. It's just you pouting, whining. It's you being a baby. Pull up your big boy, big girl pants, tighten your belt, tighten your shoelaces, hit the ground running. And if you want to see change that bad that it's consuming you, then get out and change. Standing in a picket line, standing in a protest line, holding up a sign isn't doing anything. Get out, get to work, and spend some actual time. Don't be lazy. Spend some time thinking, how can I affect change and be the change that you want to see in this country? So that's it. Let me run down those 7 things one more time. Number 1, get informed before you spout off. Number 2, ignore the media because the media is corrupt. Number 3, discuss the issues with each other. Don't argue. Number 4, be kind to each other and peaceful. Number 5, be unified as a country. Number 6, be proud to be an American. And number 7, be the change that you'd like to see. If you've got any questions or comments about this stuff, and if you don't, I'll be surprised, really honestly, because so many people have so much to say politically. I'll tell you how to get in touch with me at the end of the episode. My battery's running low on the laptop, so I'm going to make this last part quick. I want to tell you about my week just to keep the children of this country in your prayers, and, well, everybody in this country in your prayers as the winter season keeps on moving in, and things are getting cold, and people are getting colds and sicknesses and stuff. My daughter dealt this past week, as this is recorded, with a bout of strep throat, and the poor thing, I felt so sorry for her. She still doesn't have her voice back, and it's angering her because she likes to talk. She's like her daddy. And so as you read as you listen to this, it will have been released well after she should have been plenty done with the strep and healed from it. But there are going to be other people, other children in our country, and adults as well, who are dealing with all kinds of things, including strep throat and bronchitis. She had bronchitis too. And so just let's keep each other in mind and wash our hands well. Use the whole Dracula thing when we're coughing, and put your head in your elbow, so that you're not putting germs into your hands. Make sure that we stay sanitized and keep each other in mind as we're trying to get through the winter season and this flu season and all of that type of thing. And then lastly, my positive review this week is going to be for a restaurant chain that it's just kind of been my family's go-to place, and that is the Olive Garden. I hear people talk about the Olive Garden all the time and kind of make fun of it when people say, I want to go eat Italian, I'm going to the Olive Garden, and they get made fun of because it's a franchise and it's not necessarily the most authentic Italian, even though I'm sure that when they were coming up with their recipes, they used authentic Italian people. It's as authentic Italian as I need it to be. I mean, it tastes delicious. I think it is, because I'm a connoisseur of fine, authentic Italian restaurants. Anywhere I go around the Southeast, I know several places that are my normal stops now to get just absolutely authentic Alfredo. Olive Garden is kind of my go-to for my family on Saturday nights, because you can get a good value, and there's so many different options of things you can do depending on how hungry you are, how much you want to spend. And the service for us has always, at least in the Olive Garden that we go to in Anderson, South Carolina, the service is always top-notch. I don't think we've ever gotten a rude waiter or waitress, and I don't remember the name of the waiter we had this past Saturday night when we went, but he is one of those people that he's just really outgoing, really nice, tries to sort of insert himself into your group to become one of you, and he would have, I know he was working for tips and everything, but he had the attitude that you want in a waiter, like he would have given you the shirt off his back. Everything was with a smile, and as much as my family as a big group runs our waiters and waitresses around, and I'm a big believer in leaving good tips because we run them ragged, he never acted like he was getting tired. He never showed anything in his face that he was getting tired of us. And so I want to say that Olive Garden, I don't know if they're all that way, but every one of them I've been to is just a great place to go. Family atmosphere and really good food. And so I needed to give a positive review, so I thought of something positive in my life, and I guess maybe I'm hungry, and Olive Garden came to mind. So if you like the Olive Garden, go to it. If you don't know about the Olive Garden, give it a try. So that's it for episode number 60, Political Aftermath, How to Move Forward as Americans. I think it's so ultimately important that we do that. We move forward, that we don't stay stagnant and rolling around in self-pity or rolling around gloating if you came out on the other end and you're a Trump supporter. Let's unify. Let's be proud Americans, and let's come together as a country and show the rest of the world that we're still the greatest nation on this planet. If you got something else you'd like to say, or you'd like to add something to what I've said, would like to talk about anything at all, you can get in touch with me, and here's how you do it. You can get in touch with me via my voicemail line at 706-408-7456. That's 706-408-7456. Also have an email, and so far that's been the favorite way for people to get in touch with me. And that email address is feedback@michaelblackston.com. Once again, feedback@michaelblackston.com. If you'd like to go to the website, just hit roadnoisepodcast.com, and there you'll find all the social media buttons to share us, like us on iTunes, and or leave us a review and a rating and all that on iTunes. You can do all that right there, right from the roadnoisepodcast.com site, and a lot of other fun stuff too. You can leave me comments there and stream right directly from the site. So I hope to hear from you. If you're on Twitter and you'd like to follow me, that's @EverythingArts. And until next time, episode 61, thank you for sitting alongside with me. I'm Michael Blackston, your host for Road Noise, and together we're learning to live life 1 mile at a time.